Welcome to Slope Reliability, the show where we learn about reliability, observability, and resilience one day at a time. I'm your host, Stephen Townsend. Welcome back to Slope Reliability. I'm Stephen Townsend, and this is the show where we learn about reliability, observability, and resilience one week at a time. Today, I'm joined by Dinesh Sukhija. Dinesh has a wealth of experience leading platform and security engineering teams at dynamic companies like Okta, OpenDoor, and Headspace. He's been in the trenches, leading complex projects in cloud infrastructure, DevX, SRE, and most recently, cybersecurity. Some of the projects Dinesh has driven are large-scale Kubernetes modernization, improving and simplifying CI/CD capabilities by simplifying and consolidating while improving performance and reliability. Dinesh has also learned firsthand on how to build real outcome-based roadmaps and how to partner with product teams effectively. In his current role, he leads the engineering teams behind Okta's cyber defense function, managing the critical infrastructure for data and detection engineering at scale. Welcome, Dinesh. How are you going today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Stephen?
I am okay. I realized I looked in the camera and realized I look like an old man today. I'm wearing it's like old man clothing. I don't know how that happened, but it did. So I'm just going to embrace it.
Yeah, it's a little too early for you too.
And for those out there, whereabouts are you based in the world?
I'm in Toronto right now. And
today we thought we would talk about this topic of leadership for platform teams, which is cool because it's I guess something that's not talked about that often. And I imagine there's quite a lot of differences in the way that you lead a team who is delivering products versus the platforms those products are built with. So I guess my first question is, from your perspective, what is a platform team?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the platform team compromises of multiple different functions within an organization. It could be the cloud infrastructure team, the SRE teams, the DevX teams, maybe even services teams that are powering a lot of the common capabilities, be it for a product-based organization or even a technology-based organization. So it's become like an overarching function. Anything that's not product-facing kind of gets categorized under platform engineering. So that's effectively how I see platform engineering teams. I'm seeing this shift that I heard on one of the podcasts from, in fact, Charity Majors, where there's been an effective shift from calling operations team like DevOps and CloudOps into more platform teams, where the focus is shifting from the operations doing everything to the platform teams building capabilities and shifting infrastructure, SRE capabilities left within the organization to product engineers. So the way to look at it right now is a platform team really builds capabilities for the rest of the organization's engineers to do their job effectively in various departments.
In the organization I'm in right now, we call the teams who own particular systems within the organization platform teams, but they're not in the wider sense. But I've always thought platform engineering and platform teams, ideally should have some element of kind of what you were alluding to just before, self-service. So it's not just about we just manage all the infrastructure for you, but we provide product teams and others in the org a self-service way to get what they need to do the thing they need to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So you've led platform teams before, and you obviously need to provide them some kind of vision and strategy and roadmap of how to go ahead. How do you prepare a roadmap for a platform team?
Yeah, and this is one of the hardest jobs as a leader for platform teams. Going back to what you said at the start of this podcast, where leadership for platform teams looks very different for leadership for product engineering teams, especially because it's very rare to find product function within platform teams. So the engineering teams, the engineers within the platform organization become somewhat of the product managers for the team as well. And a lot of the times, it becomes really hard to quantify the outcomes of platform initiatives in a language that is well understood across the organization, so you could continue to get funded. So there's always this pressure of really being thoughtful about what you put on your roadmap that is easily transferable into funding, right? So my approach towards building roadmaps for platform teams is very outcome driven, right? at least making sure that the outcomes are well articulated when we talk about roadmaps. So the very first step that I look at it is doing some sort of an exercise with my immediate team first to understand, what our strengths and opportunities or limiters are. And that can give you insights into how you want to define the tenets that drive a lot of your prioritization of the tactics that the team identifies, either bottoms up or if it's coming from across the organization. For example, in one of my organizations, in one of the calls, when we were talking about limiters, what's limiting our team to do our best job was just the regular keeping the lights on or business as usual or supporting the rest of the organization. So all the interrupt work that keeps coming our way. And that was one of the things that we identified as a limiter for us, which defined a tenet that we start treating ourselves as customers first. So or engineer ourselves first. So what does it mean? How do we free up our time? So that becomes like one of the tenets. And then what do you do then to free yourself up or eliminate that limiter? And that, and then you have a conversation with your team to identify tactics that can kind of fulfill that roadmap item or kind of eliminate that limiter. That's one way for me to initiate a conversation about how you define, a roadmap from within the team.
Do you ever find that you are adjusting the roadmap and the kind of work that you're prioritizing based on, say, senior leadership are looking for or excited about, and maybe not necessarily doing the thing which you think would provide the most ultimate value, but sometimes having to compromise and do the thing because it's flashy or it's going to get more funding? Because I found myself in that situation. Sometimes my team is, we've had to choose what to do, and I end up building a particular dashboard, for example, which of dubious value maybe, but executives are really excited about it,
Oh yeah, absolutely. See, as a platform leader, it's you have a dual responsibility. One is towards your team and what's really important versus how do you who are your ultimate stakeholders? Your ultimate stakeholders are your product engineering teams, your executives, and you just cannot turn a blind eye. In fact, you should not, towards what the organization wants. So I was going to get to the part 2 of my roadmap building exercises, that you have to understand what the organization's objectives are, right? Everything that you do has to align towards overall organization's objectives. And, everybody's handed out some objectives, and each team is asked to come up with a roadmap that folds under overall organization's objectives. And that is basically lines up with what the executives would want. For example, for platform teams, one of the objectives could be let's do more with less, in terms of let's reduce our infrastructure costs. That's a very clear definition of what you want to do. Maybe you want to lower your observability costs. Maybe you want to lower your AWS costs, what have you. But there could be other objectives let's improve conversions, for instance, our user conversions. But what does it mean for platform team? There is no direct correlation there. Maybe there is, say, for example, if you have a platform team that operates some sort of operations functions that's embedded within the product. But let's assume you don't own that. You own core infrastructure and SRE. So, one thing that you can do is look at your developer productivity and DevX initiatives and look at what functions or what archetypes of engineers you want to expedite for this quarter or for the next 2 quarters. Like, for example, if you were building a lot of front-end capabilities, do we want to focus our improvements in the CI/CD roadmap towards the back-end capabilities, or do you want to do it for front-end, right? So you want to continue to pivot based on how the organization is pivoting from that direction. At the same time, going back to your point about chasing the shiny object or just somebody's vanity project, you want to be able to have the courage and the data to draw a line and say, no, in our opinion, this is what is more important. And I think that's why platform leadership becomes challenging, because you got to, without the product backing, you got to really understand how the platform initiatives that you're proposing are going to, lead into overall organization's objectives, and where it doesn't, and have the courage and back that up with data that why this shouldn't make the cut, or it should be under the line. So that's how I think you want to manage expectations with leadership as well.
I want to go back to something you said right at the start, actually, which is that product teams tend to have, the product teams have product owners, or maybe in the case of a non-tech org, which is building sort of internal stuff, business users embedded who are providing, this is the thing that I want, and they're shaping how you build something. We don't have that in platform teams. And I mean, you as a leader, and maybe if there's other leaders who work for you, would have a role to play in that. But for me, it's been quite rare to in my career to work with engineers who have that product owner mindset, who can actually see the bigger picture and go, not just do the thing which is fun or seems like the right thing to do just instinctively, but actually to step back and go, what are we trying to achieve, and even if it's not the most fun thing, do the thing which is going to, and then go and engage with say, if your customers are the product teams, to go and engage with them and find out what it is that their pain points are, or what they've been wanting.
Yeah.
Is it hard for you to find people that can provide that function?
It's a great question you ask, and it's taking me back to some really fine memories at my time at Open Door, where I was lucky to partner with product leaders who were equally empathetic to platform teams' challenges, but at the same time had understood how platform functions operate and why they are so integral and critical to their own, productivity and reliability and engineer velocity. And you need that somewhat of a partner in crime to drive real outcome-based deliverables, right? I've seen a lot of organizations have, the right mechanics in place. For example, obviously one-on-ones between platform and engineering leaders. You have chapter meetings, between, product engineers that have infra leanings and your infrastructure folks meeting occasionally. But also what we did, one of the most effective meetings, or the mechanics that we put in place in one of my previous organizations, was having a bi-weekly check-in on all the roadmap items that we are working on, and making sure that these are indeed the right ones and how they will be used, and is there enough feedback, right? So taking, one of the learnings that I had at Headspace, which was hypothesis-driven innovation, making sure that if you want this, you need to tell me how you're going to use it, what's the user base behind it. Validating your most critical assumption for the success of that project is also important as you, decide to take on a project or no, right? So having a very frequent check-ins, say once every 2 weeks, making sure that, hey, we are working on the right things, and you have that with each of your product leaders, right? So let's assume we had 3 or 4, product divisions within a company. Mm-hmm. We would have a infrastructure ambassador, let's say ambassadors in my team that would talk to each of these teams, and I will be part of these teams. And we have accountable roadmaps, right? Hey, this is what infrastructure team is going to do for this month. Please don't distract us, or interrupt us unless, things on fire, right? And then you make sure that we are lock and step between what we are delivering and what you're expecting. A lot of the times there's a lot of communication breakdown, and you may have heard this complaint that product leaders say, I don't know what infrastructure is doing, or why they are even doing this project. I've seen that picture play out multiple times, and you want to make sure that as a platform leader, it's your job to make sure that you build these relationships and mechanics, but at the same time, you can't do it if you don't have a strong product leader who can partner with you on this as well.
Slightly left field question. Selfishly, I want to ask is, in my organization, we have there's a lot of meetings, especially for leaders and people like delivery leads and people in those kinds of roles. And I'm always trying to find, because setting up more meetings to connect with people and make sure they're aware of like the roadmap for what I'm doing. I hesitate because they've already got so many meetings in their calendar.
Yeah.
And I'm always trying to find ways to keep people informed of the things they need to know about, and so they can feel like they're part of the journey without setting it. And I don't know, it's tricky. I'm thinking more along the lines, I've done newsletters before where it might be a once a fortnight, hey, this is what's happening in the space, which I know all you 150 people, have something to do with. And that's received reasonable feedback, but it's a lot of work to produce. But have you got any other ideas about how you can keep product teams in the loop without necessarily set up meetings?
Yeah. See, I was smiling when you said newsletters, and sometimes you don't know, is anybody even going to read this, or of the 155 people are going to read it? But it's okay. I think as a platform leader, you can't over communicate, I feel, because there's so much crosstalk happening. There's things always happening. But a platform team's job is to make sure that most people understand what you're doing. If you've launched a new capability or if you're changing something, you need to massage same information in various different languages or level of detail depending on the persona, right? So yes, my 2 mantras that I follow is meet small, distribute wide. So making sure that we have we don't crowd our meetings. First of all, we only invite people who have something meaningful to contribute. And that's something that you want to share with your departmental heads, like, hey, I need 1 or 2 people who are really invested in infrastructure, who want to understand infrastructure, who are accountable, who can communicate well to be part of these chapter meetings, right? So you want to make sure these meetings are meaningful. Second is, and this is my own personal style, is making sure every meeting is meaningful, right? So agendas, yes, like I hate it when people come to a meeting without an agenda and they just meander their way through meetings. Regardless of platform product teams, I like to go in with an agenda. If we have no agenda, let's move on. I like to make sure respectfully, but making sure that people stick to the agenda and we move on. And if there's nothing else to talk about, let's just, cut the meeting. So we want to make sure that we are mindful of these time sinks because they add up across the organization. And newsletters, I would strongly recommend that platform leaders and managers continue to distribute newsletters. It was something that I actually learned from one of my reports at Headspace, so I can't take credit for it. But you think that people aren't reading, but eventually you realize that a lot of people actually do rely on it. They glance through it and they'll see, oh, something's happening here. Let me go find out. And you want to make sure the newsletter is impactful. So you want to talk about when you are just publishing, just don't publish a status report, but talk about what does it mean for the engineer who's reading it, or what does it mean for the executive that means it. So I would structure like, hey, this is a project, but I would follow up with like in bold, like, what does it mean for you? A call to action so that they know like what's in it for me, right? And put that in a Google Doc, put that in your Slack message, in a Slack channel where all the engineers are. And that's how you over communicate. But I think newsletters are important. Effective meetings are important to make sure that there's enough collaboration across the org.
I think that's why newsletters for me take such a lot of effort, is that I'm not just going to have a template which I fill each time. Each newsletter is covering the unique thing which needs to be said at that time. But one thing I do have enjoyed in the past, and I got away with it, is I would put the stuff which everyone, the work stuff everyone's expecting to see, and here's an update on the latest design for how we're doing these environments or whatever. And then I'd often at the end of a newsletter put something from the kind of stuff I talk about on this podcast, like a new idea. Hey, by the way, have you heard about this new observability thing, or this thing called resilience engineering, or whatever it is, and
we used to have a section like across the Introverse, and we would like put links to like interesting podcasts like yours, and a few other blog posts or whatnot. And the GIFs don't hurt, so that can make them fine reading too.
Definitely on topic, but I will say that one of my biggest lessons in probably the last couple of weeks actually, is that you need to make time in your work week for stuff that gives back to you, And I think writing a little thing like that in a newsletter is a little thing that gives me joy and energizes me, gets me back into the flow of things. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, you owe it to the organization to kind of also scale up the rest of the organization on what's happening across infra. How do you continue to lead with growth mindset and challenge people and say, hey, this is out there. What do you always think about that? So continue to plant the seed of like innovation and a spark across the organization.
I guess another challenge is, and I've seen this with engineers in all kinds of places, is they like to do stuff. They like to get on, build things, fix things, investigate things, find data. They're not necessarily, in general, a lot of engineers aren't necessarily the kind of person who goes and sees the outcome and looking for the bigger picture and redirecting themselves towards the right outcome. And so that must be a culture shift, right? To say that, it's not just, it might feel good to be just doing stuff, but what's actually valuable is to make sure that the thing that you're doing is heading towards an outcome and to be pivoting, adjusting. How do you make that culture shift?
Yeah, so I think there are multiple ways you could do that. One is, at a entire team level, you want to be very clear and articulate as this is our roadmap and this is why we are doing it. So have you level set at the start of the quarter, like with the rest of the team, why we're doing it. And you need to observe each engineer's approach towards, their projects or their tickets. And we want to make sure that they understand what's the outcome of everything that they do. Right? A lot of the times you're solving a small, part in the big puzzle, right? So encourage your engineers to see the big picture from the perspective of like, okay, like this is your output. How is it going to get ingested? You might want to follow up with them and so on. It also ties back to, roadmap topic that we were talking about. Is like everything that you do needs to, come to an outcome. Like, for example, like, one one of the companies, one of the things that we were doing is ingesting logs, that would be consumed by some sort of analysis by some downstream team. And my engineer's job is like, hey, get the logs in, put it in this thing, and that's it, my job's done. No, but your job's not done, right? So you got to let the team know that what's happening, make sure that the data that you've ingested is in the form or the schema that they needed it so that they can do their job effectively. So that's outcome-based deliverable, right? So you want to make sure that you know of the outcome before you even touch the code. So you kind of continue to coach your engineers along their journey through in your stand-ups, in your one-on-one, and making sure that happens. Second thing I would definitely like to do is that, everything that we deliver needs to be measurable, right? I mean, most things could be measured, right? Especially for platform teams. So having a benchmark to begin with and where do you end with? So again, that's like another outcome-based way to make sure that, you can measure your outcome both from a product perspective, but also from a platform perspective in terms of reliability, your performance, or what have you. So those are some of the ways you want to make sure that you continue to coach the teams with regards to what are the outcomes. And you also want to measure the outcomes in terms of impact, right? So yes, everything that you do could be meaningful, but it could be meaningful to maybe 10 engineers or maybe like a small portion of your product. But you want to make sure that the work that you're doing, you analyze, you figure out what's the most impactful thing for you to achieve this quarter. Like, for example, when we were, looking at CI/CD improvements at one of my previous companies, there were multiple opportunities for us with regards to improving the performance of some of our repos, but then looking at where's the biggest traffic right now in which repo and which are our biggest challenges, and again, what's getting built on the roadmap, which requires a lot of, say, front-end development or back-end development that can shape impact and outcome for your engineers. So then you got to ask those questions for your engineers. They can go ask those questions of product teams, and then it becomes a muscle that you can continue to build across the organization.
I'm going to be honest. Apart from when I was a performance tester engineer, we're going back, it's been a few years now, 5 or 6 years ago. I felt like my work was measurable because I was doing things and it was all about the data and the performance and the scalability, capacity, and responsiveness of systems. And I could, that's the measure of success, is when those things are moving in the right direction and being testing more often and like having less effort to maintain what you're testing and better observability, those kinds of things. The work that I'm doing now, I find much, much harder to find meaningful metrics. It's so easy to pick a metric because it feels right, but it's like can be meaningless or misleading. Things like mean time to recovery just seem so natural. I feel, oh yeah, of course, mean time to recovery, that makes sense. And of course, it's garbage. It doesn't actually. It's been mathematically shown that it doesn't really tell us anything useful. But it's so easy to understand and it feels right. And I feel like there's a lot of metrics that end up going down that path. And so
that's true.
I find it really hard. And I don't know, maybe that's just the field that I work in right now. Maybe if I was in a more true platform engineering team, that would be easier.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think there are too many metrics, and metrics are we game them quite a lot depending on what story you want to tell. Like, for example, even performance or latency metrics. Like, you can zoom out and you can present a metric which shows like, hey, our availability is actually not bad over 1 month. But if you kind of zoom in over like a week, you'll see a lot of blips, right? So you can do that. Or if you're looking at latency, you just look at, say, backend latency and you don't look at end user experience. But that doesn't make sense, right? So again, as a platform leader, you want to make sure that it goes back to like, what's the real end user experience, right? So if you're in performance testing, or if you're like monitoring performance or latency, you want to make sure you look at end-to-end latency and metrics, right? Going back to mean time to recovery or mean time to detect, while very meaningful, but you want to make sure that end of the day, what are we trying to, improve upon? Like, yes, mean time to recovery, if it goes down across, that's fine. But to me, number of incidents per month is actually more meaningful, right? Like, how many times did we get trashed during the month? What was our opportunity cost for each incident? There was one mechanic I learned, I think it was probably at DoorDash, where they bring in product leaders in operational metrics meeting, and they talk about dollar impact of each incident. Instead of just talking about like, hey, we were down for like X hours or whatever. I think that drives change. That drives a cultural change with product teams realize, oh shoot, like why this is why SRE is important, because we lost $500,000 because of 5 incidents this month, right? So that's the kind of outcomes and metrics that you want to report and then translate and talk to the right people about it to drive real reliability and SRE changes.
Okay, new topic, and this is something I'm struggling with right now, is a knowledge transfer within your team or teams. And so I've got an example. There's one engineer in my team he's become in the last few weeks an absolute expert at deploying this particular cloud application that we are part of looking after. He's really good at that. No one else in the team really knows how to do it, right? And so it's like, how do I get that knowledge and spread it across my other at least two or three engineers, so there's no single point of failure? And you might think it's easy. Oh, it's just documentation or handover sessions and stuff, but I don't know.
Oh yeah,
I'm starting to come around to the idea that documentation, like at least anyone reads it, or if it's a chore to read, if it's not fun to read, or maybe there's another way. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the tribal knowledge is a real concern, especially for like mid to large size teams, as architectures tend to diverge, and then you'll have only a handful of people knowing something about it. Documentation is essential, but documentation does erode over time. It gets outdated over time, so you can't really fully rely on it. I like to make sure that we are switching things around quite a bit within the organization, and at the same time providing enough pairing sessions within the team. So making sure that people can see each other's work and each other's areas, and that helps. But I think in this post AI world, if I can use that word, or maybe in this AI world, because I think it's becoming a lot more. I wouldn't say a lot more. It's becoming somewhat easier to manage tribal knowledge as well. With generated summaries, summarization. I found enterprise search AI capabilities very effective for information discovery and summarization, and really quickly identifying things. Like one of the jobs as a DevX leader is to continue to lower the cognitive overhead of engineers in discovering information. And I think I would encourage engineering leaders to continue to adopt tools like enterprise search AI that can fan out and look at your entire organization's history, and quickly at your fingertips figure out where this knowledge lies, or what do I need to do. If there are multiple documentations about same things, it can intelligently figure out what's the most relevant one. So that's really helped, and I've seen the needle move in that direction. But as a leader for your own areas, you want to make sure there's enough coverage for your areas. And making sure that there's pairing sessions, and if there is somebody who's kind of resisting to documentation, make sure that it's things are recorded, or some other engineers can step in the way.
Yeah, the AI thing you talked about, a micro little. It's not really what you're talking about, but we've got Microsoft Copilot licenses that we can get, and I got it because I was just drowning in emails and never really getting across them all. And it's amazing, the cognitive load that's reduced by I'm like, oh man, I had a chat with a guy called Richard 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago about architecture for this system. What was it? And so I just put it in Copilot, and it just finds it all and summarizes it.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Like at any time, an infrastructure platform leader, like I remember in my time, I don't know, the previous organizations where I was responsible for 50 different SaaS vendors. And even in my second year there, I would discover, I also own this tool, right? Because it came up during email time. Somebody said, hey, you got to pay for this. I said, what is this tool? And then I had to lean on enterprise search AI capabilities to quickly understand, what is this tool? Who was the last person? And it would go search Google Docs, Slack, Coupa, various things, and just gave me a quick summary.
Well, we're almost at time. I wanted to finish with a question that you won't have had a chance to prepare for, because it's always fun. And that is, in your work right now, what is, as a platform leader, what is your biggest challenge I think you're trying to figure out at the moment, or maybe it's an unsolved problem that you have?
Yeah, I think one of the big problems that I'm trying to solve for right now is aligning on what problems to solve for. Everybody has a point of view that this is what we need to solve for, and everybody has an ask of you as an eng leader is hey, this is what I want you to solve for, and you get a completely opposite view from somebody else. So that's an interesting, both the people and the technology problem to solve on what is what are facts versus opinions. So that's one. Second is velocity, both engineering velocity, but also like how we make decisions, or like, do we have a culture of over analysis, or did they say, paralysis analysis? So how do we kind of, again, define tenets and timelines on critical decisions and how we make decisions? I think those are some both, fun process and people and technology related issues or concerns that I'm trying to solve for now.
You use the word tenet quite a lot, and I've never actually heard anyone talk about it. What's a tenet for you and your work?
Yeah, it's something that it's like a guiding principle, so to speak, right? So, for example, going back to the roadmap conversation, defining some tenets are important. Like, what is most important to us? Is it performance, or is it velocity? Is it moving fast? Like, what's most important to us right now? And these can be, they are not like values, but these are like guiding lights for your immediate roadmap, right? So, and then I like to define tenets for even at a decision level, like, for example, what tool to choose, like, but what should be our guiding principles, not the evaluation criteria, but like kind of like guiding principles, so that tomorrow, if there's a massive debate and if it comes to a tiebreaker, I can lean on that, guiding principle on making a decision. So that's how I like to frame them.
Thank you so much, Dinesh, for taking the time to chat about leadership and platform engineering. And I think we've been sort of circling for quite a while in the same circles on LinkedIn and the internet, but we only met for the first time a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah, I appreciate for your time on this. This has been a fun conversation.
Yeah. And to everyone else out there, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Stephen.